Good morning. Our next presenter is a retired engineer, management consultant, executive, and board member. We will now hear how, in just 18 months, he completed an HO scale 14 by 17 layout designed for operating sessions. We welcome Stephen Sprinkle.
Good morning, everyone. Here's my original model railroad, which disappeared due to divorce. Here's the new space in my new home for the new model railroad. I removed the cabinets. Here were my objectives. I want to assemble it quickly. I want to have very reliable operations. I'd be satisfied with plausible rather than perfect scenery. I wanted the transition period to have both steam and diesel locomotives and short freight cars. I wanted simple operations and simple maintenance. I wanted to be able to run operating sessions anytime I wanted without setup, and I wanted it to be enjoyable for both children and adults. So I came up with an idea. I would have an around the walls design, even though I did have an aisle in front of one section. I wanted a dead level track with a crossover, no changes in height whatsoever. I was going to have manual turnouts that were all reachable. I used Code 83 Pico, Insel Frogs, and FlexTrack. I used N-scale ballast rather than HO scale ballast, even though it's an HO layout, because I thought it looked better. I did provide an aisle at the front of 6 feet in depth so plenty of people could watch. I have lots of room inside the layout for operators. There's a 3-foot lift out section to get into it and a 40-inch tabletop height. Kids and adults can enjoy it, I think. Now, this is the room after I did painting, after I replaced the windows. I put lights in the ceiling. I actually put 2 kinds of lights in the ceiling. So one kind are these very pointable lights. There's 20 of those. And what you can't see is there's some in the ceiling dome lights. And I started this cabinetry with the help of a cabinet maker who's in my model railroad club. And he could do it much faster than I could. This is the layout in a sort of schematic diagram. I'll explain it very simply. Green is the main line, which basically is a double loop that crosses over itself. Blue are the passing sidings, of which there are 3. Purple is the yard, 6-track yard with an escape track for arrivals and departures. The pink here is the locomotive servicing facility with 2 tracks. And then everything brown is a spur to which we pick up or receive cars. And everything in green, green is the name of the towns, and this brownish color are the names of the different industries, of which we have quite a number. I think there's 18 industries on this. So 6-track yard, etc. There are 10 industry leads, each in a separate city. There are 18 industries. I do have 1 passenger station. I do have a power plant to coal mine recirculating track that runs under a mountain, so there's always new coal hoppers showing up with coal in them. The turnouts are number 6. There's a minimum radius of 25 inches on every curve, except for one, which for reasons I can't explain, I just goofed and let it get down to 20 inches. This is my heating and air conditioning. It's a heat pump from Mitsubishi. It's called a Split Mini. It's a weird device. It has some algorithms to save energy. So you set a temperature in it, and it may or may not come to the exact temperature you want based on atmospheric conditions and energy usage and other things. Here's progress on the layout. I'll point out a couple of things. One, this tabletop is actually cork. It's a cork inset that's 3/16 of an inch thick. And it comes in rolls that are 48 inches wide and as long as you want from Bangor cork. So my top surface was cork, which meant 2 things. One, if I want to have a road, I just expose the cork. Also, if I didn't want to bother with raised roadbed, because this is an industrial area, I could lay track right on the cork. Also, there are several rollout storage things on the layout. I have a continuous HEPA filter to get dust out of the air so it doesn't become a dusty layout. And I had builders that I brought over from my previous model railroad that I thought would work in the transition era. This is the flooring. By the way, my son works for the company that makes this flooring. It's called Shaw Industries. It's called luxury vinyl planking. It's artificial and it looks good and it's wonderful. You can clean up anything on it with alcohol. I also have a roll-away desk, which rolls under the layout, so I've got plenty of places to work on stuff. And the desk has a cork top. Here's an example of one of the storage rollouts. You can see here my technological environment in terms of a Wi-Fi connection, a DCC master, and a power supply. These are those movable lights on tracks. I have 2 tracks. There's 10 lights on each track for a total of 20. There is no dark spot anywhere on the layout. Now, some buildings I purchased for speed. This one I got off eBay. It was a little beaten up, but I fixed it up and I made it work. Some I carried over from my last layout. This is from my previous layout that I had assembled. But then a bunch of friends helped me out. So this railroad station came from a friend, Robert Meyer, and it came to me fully assembled. And I actually had help. About 5 guys helped me assemble this railroad quickly, including things like laying ballast and things of that nature. Here's an example of a building that was given to me as a kit for Christmas, and then another friend assembled it for me. So Dave Kardesh gave me the kit, and Mike Tarrant assembled it. Did a great job. And this is part of the electric generation utility called Cobb Energy Management Corp. And this is the process of assembling the yard. This is the ladder track to which you can get to each one of the ladders. It's a single-ended yard. But this ladder track actually is 2-ended, so it attaches at the main line in 2 different places, which gives you flexibility. Another shot of the track being laid in the yard. And as you can see, I lay the track directly on cork. I use thin white glue to hold it down, and that way it doesn't raise up at all. There's no thickness of glue to worry about. This is the lift-out section where it is. So this is one end of the layout. The lift-out section goes right in here. And you can barely tell, but this is a very sophisticated piece of wood. It's cut at 2 different angles and it's dovetails. And what it does is as the pull-out section drops in, it pulls it into place and holds it tightly and aligns the track very well. So my cabinet maker designed that. Great job. Here's the cutout sitting on its side of the drop-in section, and that matches that dovetail. Electrically, I have a 14-gauge bus. Actually, I have 3 of them. I have a DCC bus. I have a DC bus that's used for signal lights and certain accessories, and I have an AC bus for other accessories. I use 22-gauge feeder wires, which I soldered to the track. My DCC system is a DCS-240 command station with a PS-212 power supply. I have 1 UR92 duplex radio device with a local area network outlet. And then I have what's called a Digitrax LNWI, which allows up to 4 Wi-Fi throttles to be connected from mobile phones. So there are micro slide switches embedded in the layout on its surface, and that's what I control these signal lights with. So the dispatchers control the layouts by switching these signal lights to tell the crews what to do and throwing them turnouts by hand. So I didn't have to do a lot of putting in motors in the light. Here's an example of an accessory. My daughter, who lives in Denver, when I visited her before the COVID, took me to Caboose Hobbies. And this is a working water tower, and the spout comes down when it's time to fill and it makes noise. Oh boy. So I'm not sure what slide number I'm on. Let me try escaping for one moment, see if there's any setting that's causing this. Show media control. There's nothing here that's, yeah. Well, that's where I am now. Now, is it full screen on 27 or not? All right, let me go back to 27. Let's see if I can make this work. So there's a delay in transmitting where I'm at. That's a shame. Why don't you tell me when the screen changes? So I just click for a change. Tell me when it comes up. Okay, so this is my coal mine. and there is a opening through the mountain, and this is the recirculating track for the coal cars. I'm clicking again. Here is a sample of some of my rail cars. I was very lucky. An 83-year-old man going into a assisted living facility sold his collection of 485 freight cars he had made going back to the 1950s and beyond. They are made of brass, wood, and metal. They are beautiful cars, and they have brand names I've never heard of before, like Varney. So anyway, a dealer sold them for $10 a piece. I bought 50 of them. They needed work, coupler heights, weights, some needed new trucks or wheels. 10 of them were not salvageable, but I got 40 wonderful cars out of that collection. Okay, I just clicked, tell me when. Has it gone yet? Tell me when you see a flat car. All right, so here's an example of a flat car that was part of the collection with a wood deck. So it was a metal flat car with a wood deck. Beautiful piece of equipment. And now I just clicked, we're waiting for the slide to advance. It's going to be another flat car scene. Now let me try this. Escape. Yeah, I'll have to make it go back. We have some real software issues here. All right, here's an example of a flat car that I purchased and added a wooden deck to and weathered. Whoops. Okay, here's an example of one of the old cars that I picked up. Interestingly, they have sprung metal wheels, trucks and metal wheels. I purchased these loads, which turned out to be very nice and I thought were quite realistic. Here's an example of a purchased tank car. All I did was a little bit of weathering on it. And by the way, the track and the rail is inexpensive burnt orange paint from Home Depot. And this is the N-scale ballast that's underneath. Here's an example of one of the reefers that I got as part of the collection. Metal-sided, metal top. Some of them are wood-sided, but again, a beautiful freight car. All right, I just clicked. We have to wait a minute for it to show up. I don't know why the delay. All right, here's an example of some cars I added to the collection. So this is an AccuRail model, which I weathered and added coal to the top of. And by the way, here you can see what the cork looks like that's used for asphalt, basically. And here's examples of some of my transition area locomotives, a GP7 and an Alco RS3. And to make curves, I use these things, which are, they're called HO alignment gauges by Ribbon Rail. And they help you ensure you have nice, smooth curves. Here's an example. Well, give it a minute and it'll click forward. It's taking its time to advance. Now, let me see if I can force it. So here's an example of the lift out section in place. Here's its wire connector to provide power off to the edge there. Right here. Now, there's a problem with it, by the way. So this is meant to be a salt marsh at low tide. The problem with it is when I sent the CAD system notes over to my cabinet maker, I meant to specify that this would be 8 inches deep, so it would be narrow and lightweight. Unfortunately, I put an extra 1 in there. So it was constructed 18 inches deep, which gave me more landscape, but it's harder to take in or out. So if I had to do it over again, I'd make it only 8 inches deep. Okay, I just clicked. We have to wait a minute for it to show up on the screen. Now let's see if I can force it. Oh, there it goes. So here's an example of the fascia, a flat section. I've got holders for throttles. Whoops, there it goes. Let's try this again. So I've got holders for the throttles. Here's my radio for the wire, for the throttles, the connection for the LAN. You can see I have storage space underneath. I have a re-railer. These are the boxes for my car cart system, and I keep a skewer to do uncoupling on the edges of each one of these car cart boxes. I'll explain more about that. Okay, I just clicked. We'll wait a minute for it to advance. Here's an example of an industry that a friend assembled and painted for me. This was the kit from here to here. I added two big towers made out of PVC pipe. These happen to be tank cars purchased new, but I did weather them and make the running boards look like wood instead of metal. All right, I just advanced. Let's see if it gets going here. All right, here is the complex. So rather than every industry being one building, some of my industries are multiple buildings. So this is the Marietta Industrial Railroad. So there's a machine shop, there's a passenger station, there's a sand storage facility. There happens to be a diner at the railroad station. There's a sanding tower, there's a diesel fuel tower, there's a coaling tower, there's a water tower. Down below here is a gasoline dome. There's a conveyor bringing coal overhead to a coal pile for the coal tower. This is a warehouse, this is a machine shop, and there's another warehouse behind the crane, which is right here. I'll have to advance this manually again. So this is an example of the Harris Steel, the steel plant. And these are two buildings bought off eBay. I added a crane. Any place I have flat cars picking up or delivering, I provide a crane to do it with. And the crane is on rails that roll it this way and that way. I added smoke using cotton. I added some stuff, some structures behind the buildings. Here's an example of another crane. This is at the Marietta Industrial Railroad. And this one is actually an operating crane. It was in bad shape. It's a very old device from Germany somewhere that I got off eBay. But I got it to work basically. And as you can see here, I added wood decks and weathered the wood to the flat cars. I just clicked. Oh, there we go. Here's a multi building section. So here's a machine shop for the Cobb electric generation utility. Here's the coal dump where the track is. Here's a conveyor to a coal dump. Here's a conveyor into the electric generation building. Here's a transformer farm. Here's high tension wires. Here's a warehouse for it. And then here's an administrative building for it. And then here's another crane to bring things off of flat cars. I tried to make things flexible so I could change my mind. So all my labels on the fascia are actually stuck in place using, kind of forgot what it's called, Velcro. So I can change names, and I have, and I've rearranged towns from time to time. Whoops, I'll get us back. Again, I'm having trouble moving forward. So this is an example of the turnouts I use. They're number 6 Picos. The turnouts that have orange or on their those rails that stick out are the ones that are controlled by the dispatchers. Turnouts that do not have those colors are operated by the conductors for each train that goes by. Here's an example of how I blended using joint compound the rail crossovers at a grade crossing to the cork for the road and did a little bit of painting some road stuff. Here's the recirculating track coming out from underneath the coal mine. And I made these pieces of rock here out of foam that I cut with a hot bladed knife. Here's an example of a piece of roadway that runs. So each industry except for the coal mine has access by road and has trucks and cars coming in and out of it in addition to being serviced by trains. I went inexpensively and quickly. I bought all my trees. Admittedly, they're not the most realistic looking trees you've ever seen, but they do the job to get things up and going fast. I also made these background mountains out of foam that I cut with a flat-ended hot knife. And my signs are basically, I'll show you later, come off a label maker to get them done quickly. I did add an airplane flying overhead that's hung by fishing wire. Now, hopefully that photograph will come up in a moment. There we go. So there's the airplane. I had one locomotive that couldn't do the main long diamond crossing at the front because it had too short a wheelbase and the crossing had insulated frogs. So I turned it into a static display for a park. This shows you just an overhead again of the Marietta industrial area and the locomotive servicing track. So this goes off the layout, but it brings coal to a coal that's lifted up here, dropped into tenders on either track, diesel fuel, sanding tower, one of the water standout pipes, gasoline, used canisters, material being delivered to the railroad, etc. We also recently added some passenger service, very limited. So we have a single self-propelled Budd RDC2 car that we got from Rapido. Works very nicely. These are examples of the kind of loads that I purchased off eBay that we can put on flat cars. Here's another here's a gondola load. The only problem with this load is it's delicate. So in theory, I would deliver the load to the Harris Steel and take the load out and have empty gondolas go back, but it tends to fall apart when you do that. So I just leave it in all the time. Here's another example of the fascia. And in particular, you can see how I stacked a set of car card boxes. And basically, almost every industry has two boxes. There's a box that's labeled, like this is for American Hardware. Without an arrow means it's a car that has to stay in place because it's not ready to leave yet. If you put a car card in a box with an arrow, it means it's ready to be picked up. And because this arrow goes to the right, it means this is to be picked up by trains moving to the right. Here's an example of the car card. Basically, the card represents a car, and there are 4 possible destinations. As you move the freight car through the layout, you advance this from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and it tells you where to go next. Also, the color tells you that destination, for example, for Leah Superior Flour Company, it is to go with trains that move to the right. So orange means to the right, and yellow means to the left. Here's an example of the cards in their boxes. And again, Marietta Industrial Railroad is a destination. The box saying leave the cars put is empty. The box saying pick up all the cars with an arrow to the right is pretty full. Here's an example of another flat car from the gentleman's collection. This one is metal, it's beautiful. The only thing I did to it was add some things to hold the loads in and give it a little bit of rust weathering. This is the label maker I use to put labels on things quickly. If I get unlazy, maybe someday I'll put on other kinds of labels that look more realistic for the time period, but this works for the moment. This shows the car card boxes with a skewer at the end to uncouple cars. I find the skewers work much better if you flatten 2 sides of that point rather than just having it circular to a point. whoops, let's get this back. For my 2 locomotive servicing facility tracks, I have separate power that I can turn off just in case I get tired of hearing the idling sounds of the locomotives. Here's a view leading into that lift out section. And basically what you see is there are 1, 2, 3, 4 tracks coming in from this side controlled by 4 signals. There are 4 tracks back the opposite direction coming in. This happens to be an isolated programming track, which basically says the mainline dispatcher has to pay great attention to this. The possibility is you could have as many as 8 trains coming in. Now, we only run about 4 at a time, but you could have 4 trains headed the same direction here. So you got to watch what you're doing. This kind of shows you how things look at a distance. So, you have things for your throttles, you plug into the LAN, you got supplies and equipment underneath, you got a rerailer, you have your car card boxes, you got an uncoupling thing, you have label that tells you what city you're in, you have labels on the boxes to tell you what your destinations are. This button makes the automated water tower work. And I put cotton on the chimneys, and there we go. And this shows us the passenger station with my self-propelled car. Now this is the youngest operator on my layout. It happens to be the 4-year-old grandson of my girlfriend, and he seems to enjoy it. This is the oldest operator on my layout. My father is 95 years old, and he still does this. And he grew up in Bluefield, West Virginia. His father, my grandfather, was the foreman at the Roundhouse in Bluefield, West Virginia, where they basically serviced both the giant coal hauling steam locomotives and the fast 484 passenger locomotives. And by the way, my cabinet maker is so nice. He also gave me curtains to cover corners where there were no cabinetry underneath. And this is an operating session. Now, I haven't had any recently due to COVID, but hopefully we will reassemble at some point. And so that's the story for today. So if anybody has questions, I guess I can answer them. I forgot the name of it. It comes as a static grass in a flat section. I don't know, maybe it's 8 inches high and 6 inches wide or something about that dimension, maybe even a little bit wider. But anyway, you can look it up on eBay, and there's lots of vendors of pre-made flat static grass that you just glue down. So you cut the edges to whatever shape you want and glue it down. So it's easier than using a static applicator and all that other stuff that you sometimes see.
Okay. Dave, did you catch any questions out there? You're on mute, Dave.
Took me a second. I kept hitting the button and it wasn't unmuting. No finger today. Haven't seen any yet. This thing. Oh, here we go. How long is it taking?
18 months, with the help of 5 friends. And by the way, I have one addition that may be made. A friend of mine keeps bugging me. He says, you need to put a subway system underneath, because he and I both grew up in New York City. And I've decided I'm going to try to squeeze in somewhere elevated train track and put a few sort of subway cars on top of an elevated train track somewhere as a static display of one section of the layout.
We have another one. Can you tell folks how you make the smoke in the smokestacks?
Oh, I take a piece of brass wire, brass wire that's a little bit flexible but mostly stiff. I glue it into the chimney. Then I spread super glue on that piece of brass wire. And then I take puffs of like cotton balls and I just pull them apart a bit to make them a bit stretchier and longer and glue them all around it. Then I kind of stretch them a little bit more so you don't see the seams of the individual puffs. And it looks like white smoke.
Yeah, okay. I noticed in your slides you had some what looked like to be wire mesh rolls on a load there. How did you make those?
I did, and I purchased them. I'm trying to remember the name of the vendor on eBay. It's a senior gentleman who makes them. He does a good job. I think it was something like JWD Enterprises or JWR or JRD. I think it was JWD, but I'm not sure.
JWD. I know your loads.
Yeah, I love the loads that he creates. He creates loads of rebar that look perfect for flat cars.
Okay. Um, can you just touch on your electrical side of the thing with the layout? So your DCC system or whatnot.
All right, so it's a DCC system using Digitrax components with Digitrax DT402 wireless throttles. I have 4 of those. But I also have a device from Digitrax which provides the ability for up to 4 mobile phone throttles to hook in. The buses are 14 gauge, and I run 3 buses, one for DCC, one for DC, and one for AC accessories. I use 22 gauge feeder wires that I solder to the track from underneath. I don't have any, what do you call them? I don't have any motors that do the turnouts. The turnouts are all manual. And the signal lights came, I bought them off eBay. I got them dirt cheap. I forgot what the price was. It was like 4 of them were $12 or something. And I just bought a package of tiny micro slide switches. Again, very inexpensively, big package of switches. So, the slide switch moves it. Luckily, there's enough room inside the layout that the dispatcher and the tower operator can get to anything pretty easily to make it work. And just to give you an idea how it operates, you can have up to 4 trains, each of which has a locomotive engineer and a conductor. You have a yard master, you have a mainline dispatcher, you have 1 tower operator at the place where the lift out section is and all those tracks come together. And then you have 1 freight manager. His job is to advance the car carts and the waybills in the car carts from box to box so all the loads keep circulating. He also recirculates the load. So if a load gets to its end destination, he picks it up from that industry and brings it back to its beginning location to be recirculated. So it can keep like 13 people busy for quite a while.
Yeah, okay.
That's a
There's
lot of
sorry.
guys.
Go ahead, Dave.
I was just going to say that's a lot of folks in a room as big as you have.
Well, remember, there's nothing in the inside of the layout. It's a round the walls layout except for an aisle. So the opening in the middle is pretty big. You can fit people easily.
Well, we did have a comment that says the layout looks really great.
Thank
So
you.
people are interested in what you shared.
Whoop, my picture just disappeared. I don't know why. Did you guys go away?
No, we've still got you. I've got you. Every audio's good still.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Oh, I do have a question. Is what's the height of your layout?
So it's 40 inches to the cork flat surface, which was a compromise. It's high enough to keep adults interested, but it's low enough that children old enough to understand can probably still see it.
Okay. What about the track work? What brand of track
It's
and
all
code?
Pico.
Okay.
And it's all Pico, Code 83, and Pico Insulfrog, turnouts number 6, and a crossover, and that's about it.
Okay. Turnout control. What are you using for your turnout control?
I don't. It's all manual. You're flipping with your fingers.
Okay. That makes it easy, doesn't it?
That's how you get it going fast. If I had to put the motors under the layout for each turnout, I'd be building it for a few more years.
Okay. Lighting for your layout. What do you have set up there for the lighting?
So there's I think there's 6 or 8 dome lights that are LED in the center of the ceiling. You have to realize the ceiling's, it's flat at the top, but it's kind of angled at the side with the roof line. And then there's 2 long tracks. Probably each track is, I'll guess, 18 or 19 feet long. There's 10 pointable LED lights on each track. so that I can light up very specific parts of the layout. And so basically there are no, on the layout, there's no shadow and everything is lit.
Yeah, okay. I see there's another quick question that's come in on YouTube is, I saw a connector joining the layout underneath. What are the connectors?
Oh, I got those at Home Depot. They are low voltage connectors that are used for low voltage outside applications, like maybe low voltage lighting outside. Um, and so that's, and these come in a package of 4, I think. And you just stick the wire into them. It doesn't require even stripping the, well, I'm trying to remember. I think you may have to strip the wire, then you stick it in and it just holds it.
Okay. Dave, is that all the questions that you can see there?
That's all the ones I can see. I have one question for you though. Um, it's said that the layout is never done. What's one thing you still want to do on this layout besides
Well, bugged by my friend, I'm going to find somewhere to squeeze in a little bit of an overhead railroad that will have subway cars on it. Now, I haven't figured out if I'm going to put it over a roadway or over a piece of existing track or have an angle over a corner. And I'm not sure it's completely feasible, but I'm going to give it a try. So we'll see.
And there was one last question. It says it looks modular. Is it, and how do they go together?
Did come in sections, but it's not a modular standard. So the cabinet maker basically made each corner as a segment. And then between each set of corners, there are 2 linear segments. So basically, and then there's one lift out section at the front. And that's how we could get it up the staircase, because it's one of those staircases that has a half a flight of stairs, turns to the right, goes another half flight. So in theory, we could separate it again. Now, I did not put connectors at each sector boundary for the buses underneath. So if I ever moved the layout, I'd have to cut all the buses and put in connectors. Interestingly, I did that with my previous model railroad when I just knew I was getting divorced, and actually sold it to a friend of mine who did disassemble it, put it up in his space. And the only thing he changed in a major way was he put bigger legs so it would be higher up. I think his is 50 inches higher rather than mine. He was very lucky. He had the exact size spaceport in his basement. So the old one is operating. It's got a different theme now than I had, but it is an operating layout somewhere else. So it was pretty sturdy that you could take it apart and move it even after it was assembled.
Okay, I think that's about all the questions that I can see there. Thanks again for putting up with us through the few little difficulties we got at the start of the stream. But it looks like we've got all that tested and going now, so we're going to cut to a few ads and we'll be back shortly with the next clinic.
Thank you guys. Bye-bye.